AR-15, gun rights, these are difficult matters to deal with in a legal way, but to some, that's the only recourse they have is to battle it out legally.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, just looking at this video, it just seems so strange to see a juvenile, you have a kid walking down the street with an assault rifle. And then, he shoots people, and at the end of it, he's walking up the street with his hands up, and the police drive right by him. That was the one thing that I think really blew my mind when I first saw this video. Yeah, and so for people who really want to fight something, I think that's the way to go. Is starts with gun rights.
Yeah, obviously. These are two very separate cases. Brooke and I were both talking about the situation going on in Georgia. There's another trial underway. We've got a break for the weekend in that trial of the men who shot and killed Ahmaud Arbery. And we know that these trials are happening in separate states and are happening with separate groups. And we don't believe they're going to be influenced. But one has to wonder if this will have some sort of residual effect on the decision made there.
It's possible. But then again, these are while they're very similar, they're two different cases with different sets of facts. And, the defendants who testified, their testimony was very different, because you have Travis McMichael, who basically said, well, he did in fact say that Ahmaud Arbery posed no imminent threat to him at any time. So it's very difficult to prove self-defense when the defendant himself says that the person that he shot and killed posed no threat to him. I mean, that's the main element of self-defense.
There seems to be a fair amount of law enforcement surrounding some of the individuals leaving there. It looks like some older relatives, and I don't know if they're relatives of the men who were shot or if they are relatives of the defendant. It's kind of hard to tell when you've got that many cameras and that kind of crowd of people. You've obviously been involved in seeing some of these high-profile cases. There's just such an unprecedented amount of security and law enforcement presence there today, David.
Yeah, there really is. And, I mean, that's how it's going to be going forward, and it has to be that way, because we're dealing with such cases, with such issues of social justice, social injustice. And, I mean, this is a time in America where things are really changing and rapidly evolving, and people are seeing the power they have when they come together. And, that's why it's important just to reiterate that when people come together and protest, you have to keep it peaceful. That's the way to truly affect change, is to keep it peaceful.
Yeah, there's been a lot of progress made, but this is a reminder from a lot of people that there is so much work yet to be done. And some of the people there vowed to sort of keep the struggle going. I can't really tell where they're moving. I imagine that at some point they're going to have the jurors allowed to leave the courthouse. They've been there for some time, and I'm sure there's going to be a fair amount of security for them as well, because we know there was a bit of a scuffle when there was a reporter from one of the cable stations that was said to have been following the bus full of the jury, and there was all sorts of hubbub about that. Brooke, let's listen to this for a second.
To take the lives of two innocent people and not be held accountable for it. This was not self-defense. This was not the appropriate use of deadly force. It was wrong.
We are proud that it's brought so many of our different organizations together. Once you do that, you can never turn back. The victory that we will achieve is not far out there in the distance, and it'll change this country. So we're going to continue to work together, push coalition, lock, the Blake family, Bianca Austin, the Taylor family, the Floyd family, to get justice that'll hit everybody around this nation. So we're far from over. We stood with the Haitians in the plaza, in the federal plaza in Chicago, when that went on down at the border. We are united as one. We're going to move as one people, and it will change the world. Peace and love.
Justin, would you do a live interview?
All right, Brooke, let's bring you back in. Have you seen any reaction here locally at all?
Not so much reaction. I have to be honest with you, Michaela. As soon as I tweeted the verdict, just a simple one sentence, my Twitter is almost frozen with the type of reaction and the type of responses.
I'm sure.
I'm curious if I could ask David a question.
Please.
Because, you know, we are in so many ways, if we're honest, you know, about the history of this country, we are in a space that is completely similar to what we've seen before, but in so many ways, it's different. And before this verdict, depending on who you talk to, this is a dangerous vigilantism or self-defense, a clear-cut case for so many people of self-defense. And so I'm curious, from a legal perspective, does this verdict set a precedent, a legal precedent?
It depends, and it depends on the cases that come up following this, because in this particular case, this was such a unique set of circumstances. I mean, given that you have a juvenile, he has an assault rifle, going out to defend a car wash. So he's there with the intent to use this weapon. Then there's little discrete things that happen. If you chop it up, there's different events in the shootings. And so it depends on if this is 3 separate shootings or if this is one continuous event. And then also going to the act of provocation. I mean, I think that's going to be important and may set a precedent there in terms of what constitutes provocation. Because just the fact, I mean, that's what this came out to, just the fact of, you know, this Kyle Rittenhouse being out there with the assault rifle was not adequate provocation. There needs to be a more overt act.
Yeah, I was just taking a look on Twitter, and it's the same thing. You want to see if you can get some reaction to things, and there isn't. Again, if you're just tuning in, 10:40 is the time here in Los Angeles, and we're not the only ones watching the courthouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin, essentially put on the map because of the situation that happened. We went to trial fairly quickly for this case. Kyle Rittenhouse, just 17 years old at the time of the shooting, 18 years old now. Remind us, David, what was he facing if he had been found guilty?
I believe he was facing life imprisonment for all of the charges. And then there was the 9 months for the misdemeanor charge, which was the unlawful possession, that the judge dismissed because of the length of the barrel. But he was going to spend potentially the rest of his life behind bars.
A very young man at the time, and now still just 18 years old. David, we'll ask you to hold the line for us. Brooke Thomas and Michaela Pereira in the GDLA studio.